"You don't belong in this seat." The words dropped like a hammer, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Nicole Harris, a blonde woman draped in black designer fabric with a Louis Vuitton tote strapped into the seat beside her, didn't whisper. She declared it, sharp and certain, like policy. Row 2 Ampere. First class. The sunlight poured in from the window, washing the leather in a pale glow, making the tension impossible to hide. Every passenger within earshot turned. A man lowered his newspaper. A couple paused their iPads. The quiet luxury of Horizon Airlines first class had shattered in an instant. Marcus Carter stood in the aisle. Tailored light gray suit, white shirt, navy tie. Shoes polished, posture straight, eyes calm. He looked every inch the kind of man who belonged in first class or anywhere he chose to sit. Yet Nicole's verdict echoed through the air like it was final. "You don't belong here." Marcus's voice was low, even, measured. "Check the boarding pass. 2 Ampere is mine." Nicole laughed. Not a soft laugh, but a sharp one, meant to sting. She leaned back in the wide leather seat, took a sip from her champagne flute, and tilted her head. "Economy is back there," she said, pointing toward the curtain with one manicured finger. "That's where people like you sit." Gasps rippled through the rows. Someone muttered, "Did she just say that?" A passenger in row 3 lifted his phone. Red light blinking. Already recording. From the galley, Brian Foster, a young flight attendant, strolled up. He didn't look at the boarding pass Marcus held. He didn't ask for ID. He looked Marcus up and down, light suit, calm presence, and smirked. "Ma'am's right. Maybe you're in the wrong section. Economy's waiting." The words weren't just instructions, they were dismissal. Condescension wrapped in a smile. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. His tie caught the sunlight, gleaming against the pale blue cabin light. He inhaled once, steady, then his reply, just as steady. "This seat is mine." "Confirm it." The silence that followed wasn't luxury anymore. It was loaded. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes darting. One whispered to another, "This is about to blow up." Another, already filming, whispered into his mic, "Watch this. They're really doing this to him." Nicole scoffed again, louder this time, ensuring the whole cabin caught every word. "Some of us actually belong here. Not you." The air changed. The hum of the aircraft systems felt heavier, pressing down. The champagne bubbles in Nicole's glass fizzed louder than they should have. The cabin wasn't quiet anymore, it was charged. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't argue. He simply adjusted his cuff, straightened his tie, and locked eyes with Nicole. His silence wasn't weakness, it was gravity. It anchored him while everything around him spun into chaos, and in that gravity, the stage was set for what no one in that cabin was ready to witness. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus Carter. The cabin of Horizon Airlines first class glowed in pale daylight, every surface polished to reflect wealth. Wide navy blue leather seats stretched with enough space to cross legs comfortably. Champagne flutes glistened on armrests, the kind of setting designed to feel untouchable, insulated from the chaos of the world behind the curtain. Yet chaos had already slipped in. It was sitting in 2 Ampere, smirking behind designer sunglasses. Nicole Harris hadn't moved since her declaration. Her Louis Vuitton tote sat strapped into the neighboring seat, like a smug passenger of its own. Her confidence wasn't quiet, it was invasive. She laughed again, louder this time, as if to remind the cabin of her version of truth. First class is for those who've earned it. Not him. Brian Foster, the young flight attendant who had strolled up earlier, folded his arms now. He didn't ask for Marcus's ID. Didn't check the passenger manifest. He simply leaned against the bulkhead, nodding to Nicole as if she'd just done his job for him. "We've seen this before," he said casually. "People walk up, claim a premium seat. Doesn't make it theirs." Passengers murmured. Some shook their heads. Others kept filming. A businessman in row 1 whispered, "That's not policy." His wife tapped his arm, urging him to stay quiet. But their eyes stayed locked on Marcus. Marcus hadn't sat down. He stood steady in the aisle, the boarding pass still tucked into his jacket pocket, its torn edge barely visible from Nicole's earlier mockery. His light gray suit caught the glow from the window, making him look carved from the sunlight itself. Calm, upright, immovable. "Scan the ticket," he said simply. His voice was even, not raised, but it carried. It cut through the murmurs. Brian chuckled. "Relax, sir. We'll get the captain. Until then, you're holding up boarding." At the far end of the cabin, a second attendant, Laura Hayes, 30-something, tight bun, tighter smile, pressed a button on the wall. Her voice carried through the small intercom. "Security to gate B14. Possible seating issue." A ripple ran through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances. One man whispered into his phone. "They're calling security on him." Nicole tilted her glass of champagne, swirling the bubbles, relishing the escalation. "See. They know you don't belong." From the galley, a trainee attendant lingered. Mia, barely 20, uniform too new to sit right on her shoulders. She bit her lip, glancing at the handheld scanner she'd used moments earlier. She had seen it flash green when Marcus boarded. She had seen his name, Marcus Carter, row 2 Ampere. She took a step forward, then stopped. Fear of her supervisors pinned her in place. Meanwhile, a woman in row 3 raised her phone higher, whispering, "This is going online. Right now." Her friend nodded, already typing captions into a live stream. The cabin had shifted. First class was no longer sanctuary. It was a stage, and Marcus stood at the center of it. Nicole leaned forward, her sunglasses sliding just enough to reveal her eyes, sharp and cold. "Men like you don't sit next to women like me." Gasps rose again. Phones lifted higher. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. His silence was louder than her words. The luxury of Horizon's first class still gleamed around them, the polished wood, the champagne, the hushed lighting, but its promise of dignity had already been broken. And the passengers knew it. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, eyes steady. The storm was building, but he was still anchored. And for those watching through phones, through narrowed eyes, through the crackling tension, one truth was becoming clear. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about something larger. The air inside the cabin had changed. What once smelled faintly of champagne and leather now carried the sharp bite of tension. The hum of the aircraft seemed louder, filling the silence between every accusation. Laura Hayes, the senior attendant with her bun pulled so tight it seemed to pinch her brow, stepped closer. Her voice was clipped, rehearsed, like she'd said it 100 times before. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this area until we verify your claim." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Nicole, still lounging in Marcus's seat, gave a satisfied little smile and raised her glass. Finally, someone with sense. Marcus didn't move. His hands rested lightly at his sides, posture straight, gaze fixed. His voice came out low, controlled. "My boarding pass is valid." "Scan it," Brian snorted. "Sir, enough. Don't make this harder. Step out of first class." His tone carried the smug authority of someone who thought his uniform was armor. A murmur rippled through the passengers. Phones hovered higher, capturing every word. A man in row 1 muttered. "He showed the ticket. What's the problem?" His seatmate hushed him, but the doubt had already spread. From the cockpit door, Captain Daniel Pierce emerged, broad-shouldered, late 50s, his expression carved into permanent disapproval. He didn't ask Marcus a single question before siding with his crew. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. But his tone already carried the answer. Marcus was the problem. Brian jumped in quickly. "Unauthorized passenger trying to take a premium seat, Captain." Nicole lifted her chin, sunglasses glinting in the cabin lights. "Told you, didn't I? He doesn't belong here." Captain Pierce gave Marcus a long, cold look. Then, with the finality of a gavel, he said, "Sir, step back into the main cabin." Now, the words hit like a verdict. The silence that followed was suffocating. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, whispering, recording, documenting. Marcus stayed rooted. He adjusted the cuff of his light gray jacket, movements slow, deliberate. His voice, calm as ever, Number. This is my seat. Confirm it. The clash was drawn. On one side, uniforms, authority, assumption. On the other, one man in a pale suit, steady as stone. The luxury cabin had become a tribunal. And everyone watching knew the storm hadn't even peaked yet. Captain Pierce's order still lingered in the cabin air. Step back into the main cabin. Now. His voice had carried authority, but not fairness. It wasn't a command to solve a problem, it was a sentence meant to erase a man. Marcus did not move. He stood in the narrow aisle of first class, sunlight catching the edges of his light gray suit, the navy tie cutting a sharp line across his chest. His hands remained steady at his sides. He didn't shout. He didn't protest. He simply held the silence like it was his weapon. That silence unsettled people. Nicole fidgeted slightly, annoyed that her words weren't met with desperation. "Did you hear the captain?" She pressed, her voice louder now. "Back of the plane, that's where you belong." But Marcus stayed rooted, eyes calm, face unflinching. He turned his head just enough to look past Nicole and Brian, not at them, but at the window. Outside, the wing glistened in the noon sun. He stood like he had all the time in the world. Passengers shifted. Phones rose higher. What had started as quiet recordings now became deliberate angles, whispers into mics. "Look how calm he is. They're really doing this? This is going online." Emma, a passenger in row 3, leaned forward to whisper toward her friend. "He showed his pass. I saw it. He's telling the truth." Her friend nodded, eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. From the galley, Mia, the trainee attendant, hovered again. Her hands tightened on the scanner she still carried. She had seen the green light flash when Marcus boarded. She had seen his name appear. The truth weighed heavy in her chest, but her voice caught in her throat. Laura Hayes noticed the hesitation and snapped, "Stay out of this, Mia." Nicole chuckled again. Sipping her champagne like this was entertainment. "You see? Even your staff knows better." Marcus didn't bite. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even correct her. His silence filled the space where anger was expected, and that silence was louder than rage. The hum of the aircraft seemed amplified now. The faint clink of a champagne flute sounded like glass breaking. Every small movement in the cabin felt exaggerated against Marcus's stillness. He wasn't resisting the way they expected. He was waiting with the kind of patience that made the crew uneasy. Captain Pierce shifted his weight, jaw tightening. Authority was supposed to end this quickly, yet here it was, dragging on, unraveling in front of every watching eye. Marcus adjusted his cufflink once, slow and deliberate. No words. Just presence. And in that presence, the power dynamic quietly began to shift. The passengers could feel it. The crew could sense it. Nicole, suddenly restless in her stolen seat, masked her discomfort with another scoff. But the truth was dawning, silently, steadily. Marcus's calm wasn't weakness, it was gravity, and it was pulling every eye, every camera, every judgment in the cabin toward him. The silence couldn't hold forever. It cracked when a voice rose from row 3. "I saw his ticket," Emma said, firm but trembling slightly. She was middle-aged, professional, the kind of passenger used to being ignored when inconvenient. This time, she refused. "He scanned in. His seat is real." Her words carried across the cabin. Heads turned. Phones shifted focus from Marcus to Emma, back to Marcus again. A ripple of recognition moved through the rows. Nicole, still lounging in the seat, rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You don't know what you saw." But Emma leaned forward, voice sharper now. "I do. He belongs here." A man beside her, Michael, lifted his phone higher, speaking directly into his live stream. "This is discrimination. Plain and simple. Horizon Airlines is throwing out a man who's already paid for his seat. Look at him. Look how calm he is while they try to erase him." The chat on his screen scrolled fast, angry emojis, shocked comments, voices from outside the cabin already reacting in real time. Brian scoffed. "Ma'am, stay out of this. We know what we're doing." His tone carried the arrogance of procedure without proof. Laura Hayes cut in sharply, eyes darting to Emma. "You're interfering with airline operations. Sit back down, but the authority wasn't landing the way it had before. Not with cameras rolling. Not with voices rising. From the galley, Mia stepped forward again, almost against her own will. Her voice was quieter than Emma's, but it trembled with truth. The scanner flashed green, she said. Her eyes met Marcus's for just a second. He's on the list. His name is there. The statement hung heavy in the air. For a moment, there was silence, not the comfortable silence of first class, but the uneasy silence of authority being questioned. Nicole snapped, sunglasses slipping down her nose. You're a trainee. You don't know what you're talking about, but the cabin had heard it. The passengers had heard it. Cameras had caught it. Marcus hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. But his gravity had drawn others into his orbit. The truth was no longer his alone to carry. And for the first time, the crew's certainty began to fracture. Nicole's patience snapped. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head and leaned forward, eyes narrowing on Marcus as if he were an intruder trespassing on private ground. Her voice cut through the cabin, deliberate, sharp. Men like you don't sit here. Not next to women like me. Not in first class. The words hit harder than turbulence. Passengers shifted, some gasping audibly. Phones caught every syllable. The line wasn't just about a seat. It was about status. About who was allowed to exist in this polished, expensive space. Marcus didn't blink. He stood still, posture flawless, eyes steady. The quiet strength in his silence seemed to infuriate her more. Brian stepped closer, smirk widening. She's right. You're out of your league, man. Let's not make this worse. His tone was dripping with condescension, like he was humoring a child. Captain Pierce, still blocking the aisle near the cockpit door, added fuel. Sir, you are disrupting the cabin. If you don't move, we'll have you escorted out. Final warning. A final warning for what? For existing? For insisting on a seat he had already bought. The cabin hummed with a dangerous kind of quiet, the kind where everyone knew the next word would matter. Nicole seized the moment. She raised her voice, making sure every passenger heard. First class isn't for charity cases. It's not for people who slip through cracks. It's for people who belong. And you don't. Emma flinched in her seat, horrified. Michael whispered into his phone. She said it. She said it out loud. His livestream comments exploded with outrage. Mia's hands shook. She wanted to speak again, but fear gripped her. She looked at Marcus instead, hoping her eyes could carry the words she couldn't yet say. Marcus exhaled slowly, as if letting the weight of every insult roll off his shoulders. His silence was not surrender. It was calculation. Nicole smirked, mistaking his stillness for weakness. She tipped her champagne glass toward him, a mock toast. Back of the plane, or better yet, off the plane. That's where you belong. The cabin seemed to lean in, every passenger holding their breath. Phones hovered, recording, broadcasting. The humiliation was now public, undeniable, but Marcus's stillness remained. Calm. Grounded. As if he had already decided this game would not end the way they thought. And for those who had seen injustice before, for those recording through trembling hands, there was a shared, unspoken sense. The breaking point had arrived. The insult still echoed in the cabin. Back of the plane. Or better yet, off the plane. That's where you belong. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't look at Nicole, or Brian, or the captain. He let the words hang in the air, heavy, poisonous, and he breathed them in like smoke he'd tasted before. Because he had, in his mind, the cabin's polished leather and champagne haze blurred into another memory, one that lived deep in him. 16 years old. Charlotte. A hotel lobby that gleamed with chandeliers and marble floors. He dressed in his Sunday best pressed shirt, borrowed tie because his mother had told him. If you look the part, they'll treat you with respect. He remembered the sting of pride, walking in with his cousin, just wanting to use the restroom before heading to a family dinner. He remembered the concierge's eyes, cold and sharp, cutting him down before he even spoke. Young men like you don't belong in here, the man had said, pointing to the door as if Marcus were dirt on the marble floor. Find somewhere else. No request. No hesitation. Just a verdict. And Marcus had walked out that day, humiliated, burning with shame he didn't deserve. He remembered the silence in the car ride home, the way his cousin had stared out the window, both of them pretending it didn't hurt, pretending it was normal. It hadn't been the last time. Not at 25, when he'd been passed over for a promotion because he didn't fit the image the firm wanted. Not at 32, when a client asked if he was the driver, before realizing he was the one signing the deal. And now, here again. 39 years old. Tailored suit. Ticket bought in full. Name on the manifest. Still hearing the same words, "You don't belong." The memory folded back into the present. The polished cabin of Horizon Airlines first class returned, but the echo of every past rejection clung to the air. Marcus adjusted his cufflink slowly, his movements deliberate, as if anchoring himself in the here and now. He wasn't 16 anymore. He wasn't powerless. Nicole's smirk faltered for just a moment as she watched him stand so calmly in the storm she'd stirred. She didn't understand it, but others did. Emma's hand tightened on her phone. Michael whispered to his live stream. This isn't the first time he's heard this. You can see it in his face. Marcus's silence wasn't emptiness. It was history. It was every insult he'd carried. Every door slammed in his face. Every time he'd been told no. And now, it was about to turn into something else. The cabin held its breath. Nicole still smirked in 2 Ampere. Glass of champagne lifted like a trophy. Brian leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded, waiting for Marcus to fold. Captain Pierce stood like a stone at the front of the aisle, authority on his shoulders, certainty in his voice. But Marcus didn't bend. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket. The motion was calm, precise. No rush, no panic. He pulled out his phone, its silver edges glinting in the light streaming from the window. Passengers leaned forward. Cameras tilted closer. Even Nicole straightened slightly, sunglasses slipping lower on her nose. Marcus pressed a button, lifted the phone to his ear. His voice was steady, businesslike, utterly out of place in the heat of this humiliation. "Rachel," he said. The cabin hushed further. Everyone could hear. "Log this. Horizon Flight 227. Gate B14. Document everything." On the other end, his assistant's voice came crisp, efficient. "Already recording, sir. Do you want me to notify the board?" Marcus's reply was soft, but every word cut. "Yes, put it through. Make sure they see this in real time." Brian chuckled, but it was shaky now. "Calling your friends won't change policy, sir." His words were meant to belittle, but the edge of unease showed. Nicole scoffed, waving her champagne glass. "Pathetic. Who are you calling? Your lawyer?" "Nobody cares." But Marcus didn't answer them. He was already past them. Rachel's voice returned, firmer this time. "Board's online. They're waiting for your word." The phrase froze the air. The board. Not family. Not friends. Not a lawyer. The board. Emma's eyes widened. She whispered to her phone. "Did you hear that? The board." Michael repeated it louder for his live stream. "The board is watching this live." Comments exploded across his feed. Mia, the trainee attendant, looked at Marcus with sudden recognition. Something in her expression shifted from fear to realization. She knew. She didn't dare say it yet, but she knew. Captain Pierce tried to reassert control. He stepped forward, voice booming. "Sir, put your phone away. You are disrupting this cabin." Marcus turned his head slightly, gaze calm, voice quiet but razor sharp. "I'm not disrupting anything. I'm documenting." He lowered the phone for a moment, enough for everyone to see the screen glowing with a live conference call. Names scrolled across the display: board members, executives, decision-makers. Marcus looked back at the crew, then at Nicole. His tone remained calm, unshaken. "You think silence means I've accepted your verdict? You're wrong. It means I've given you every chance to correct it yourselves." Nicole shifted uncomfortably now, her mockery faltering. Brian's smirk slipped. Even Captain Pierce's jaw tightened. The certainty that had carried them moments ago was cracking under the weight of one calm man with a phone. And Marcus hadn't raised his voice once. The passengers knew. The cameras knew. The crew was beginning to realize. This wasn't just a man in the wrong seat. This was something else entirely. The cabin was no longer just watching. It was shifting. Every eye, every phone, every lens now pointed not at Nicole's smug grin or Brian's crossed arms, but at Marcus still standing, still calm, phone steady in his hand, as Rachel's voice carried faintly through the speaker. Then, it happened. The silence cracked, this time not with mockery, but with truth. Mia, the trainee, stepped forward. Her hands trembled at her sides, but her voice rose, clear enough for all to hear. I scanned his boarding pass. It flashed green. His name is on the manifest. The words echoed through the rows. The passengers leaned in, as if those syllables had unlocked something they'd been waiting to hear. Nicole spun toward her, eyes blazing. You don't know what you saw. Stay in your place, trainee. But Mia didn't step back. Her cheeks flushed, her voice stronger now. Number, I know what I saw. He belongs here. The cabin stirred. A ripple of energy swept through the rows. Emma seized it, standing halfway out of her seat. She's telling the truth. I saw his ticket myself. This man is being humiliated for no reason. Michael, still live streaming, turned his phone toward Mia and Emma in quick succession. You're hearing it. From staff and passengers. He belongs here. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's targeted. His chat feed surged, hearts and angry emojis flooding the screen. Brian tried to reassert control, waving a hand dismissively. Passengers need to remain seated. This is a safety issue. No, it isn't. Michael cut him off, voice loud now. This is about dignity. Stop hiding behind safety to justify discrimination. The words landed heavy. Phones kept recording. A woman in row 5 shouted, "He has every right to that seat." Another, younger, added, "We're not blind, we see what's happening." Even Captain Pierce faltered. He adjusted his cap, his authority cracking under the weight of collective defiance. Nicole Harris, still clinging to 2 Ampere like it was her throne, tried to laugh it off, but the sound came thin, brittle. "Oh, come on. You people don't understand how this works." But she was wrong. They did understand. And they were no longer silent. Mia, hands still shaking but voice firm, repeated it louder this time. His name is Marcus Carter. Row 2 Ampere. I saw it myself. The declaration rang like a gavel. Cameras caught every word, every face, every flicker of fear from the crew who moments earlier had laughed. And Marcus? He hadn't spoken since Rachel's call. He simply adjusted his cuff again, eyes calm, letting the truth roll through the cabin on the voices of those who chose to rise. For the first time since the confrontation began, the crew wasn't just facing Marcus, they were facing everyone. The cabin had shifted against them, but Captain Daniel Pierce wasn't ready to surrender control. Authority was the only language he spoke, and his tone now came out clipped and iron-hard. "Enough," he barked. His voice carried down the aisle like a whip. "This is my aircraft, and my word is final. Security will remove you, sir, if you do not comply." The phrase "remove you" ignited a fresh wave of whispers. Passengers murmured, phones lifted higher, live streams filled with furious comments. The red lights of half a dozen cameras glowed across the rows like watchful eyes, recording every breath. Nicole seized the moment, leaning forward in 2 Ampere, voice dripping with triumph. "Hear that? You're done here. They're taking you out." She smirked, swirling what was left of her champagne. "I told you people like you never last in spaces like this." Brian moved closer, stepping into Marcus's personal space. "Sir, don't make this worse. Gather your things and head back. Or security will do it for you." Laura, the senior attendant, tapped her radio, her voice sharp and decisive. "Ground security to Horizon Flight 227 cabin. Immediate assistance required." The words hit like a countdown. The passengers knew what that meant. Uniformed officers would step onto the plane, and whatever happened next would go viral in seconds. Emma shot up in her seat. "This is outrageous," she shouted, her voice cracking with fury. "You're humiliating a man who has every right to sit there. We all saw his ticket. We all heard your trainee confirm it." Michael spun his livestream toward the captain, narrating with indignation. "You're watching this live, Captain Daniel Pierce threatening to have a paying customer dragged out of first class. Remember this name." His chat exploded in all caps. "Lawsuit. discrimination. Never flying horizon again. Mia, trembling, tried again. Captain, please, he belongs here. But Laura silenced her with a glare sharp enough to cut. Through it all, Marcus remained unmoved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He adjusted his tie, the pale daylight gleaming off his suit jacket, and looked directly at Captain Pierce. "Touch me," Marcus said, voice low, steady, carrying more weight than a shout ever could. "And you'll answer for it in a boardroom, not a holding cell." The words silenced the cabin. Even the hum of the engines seemed to quiet under the force of them. Nicole's smirk faltered. Brian blinked. Laura's hand froze on her radio. For the first time, Captain Pierce hesitated. His authority, once unshakable, wavered under the calm certainty of the man standing before him. And the passengers, every witness, every phone, felt it. The shift, the unraveling, the storm teetering on the edge of breaking. Marcus hadn't needed to shout. His quiet defiance filled the cabin like thunder waiting to strike. For a long second, no one moved. Captain Pierce's order still hung in the air, heavy and brittle. Security was on its way. Nicole leaned back smugly, in 2 ampere, certain she had won. Brian and Laura held their ground, uniforms like shields. The passengers whispered furiously, phones raised, the world beyond the cabin already watching. And then Marcus moved. Not in anger, not in haste, slowly, deliberately. He slipped his phone from his ear and turned it outward so everyone could see the screen. On it, a live video call. 5 faces arranged in neat squares, executives in suits, backgrounds of high-rise offices, company banners. The Horizon Airlines Board of Directors. Rachel's voice carried crisply through the speaker. "They're all here, sir. Recording. Awaiting your decision." The cabin gasped. Nicole sat up straighter, her champagne flute clinking against the armrest. What is this?" she stammered. Marcus's voice was calm, level, impossible to mistake. "My name is Marcus Carter. I am the CEO of Carter Global Holdings, and I own 25% of Horizon Airlines." The words landed like an explosion without sound. For a moment, the cabin froze in disbelief. And then the shock rippled outward: gasps, shouts, hands covering mouths. Phones zoomed in. The live stream comment sections detonated in a flood of all caps. "No way. He owns the airline. This is unreal." Emma clapped a hand over her mouth, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Michael spun his phone back to Marcus, shouting into the live stream, "You're seeing this. The man they tried to throw off his own flight is the man who owns it." Mia's hands trembled at her sides, but her face broke into relief, vindication shining in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "I knew it, I knew it." Nicole's smugness shattered. Her sunglasses slipped from her head into her lap. She stared at Marcus, her lips parting, searching for words that wouldn't come. Brian stuttered. You can't be serious." Laura's face drained of color. The radio slipped slightly in her hand, and Captain Pierce, who had commanded with authority minutes earlier, looked as though the ground had been cut from under him. His jaw worked soundlessly before he managed. This is impossible." Marcus slipped his phone back into his breast pocket, every movement measured, every breath calm. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to explain further. His presence said it all, but he chose words anyway: sharp, final, undeniable. "You called me a fraud in an airline I own. You told me to move to the back when I built the front, and you thought silence meant submission." He paused, eyes sweeping across Nicole, Brian, Laura, Captain Pierce. Then he looked past them to the passengers, the cameras, the witnesses. "You were wrong." The cabin erupted. Some passengers clapped, others shouted. Phones captured every second, every reaction. The sound of applause clashed against stunned silence from the crew. Nicole tried to speak, her voice cracking. I didn't know." Marcus cut her off with a look so sharp it silenced her completely. His voice came quiet but final. "The problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated someone you thought didn't matter." The words reverberated through the cabin, sinking deep into every witness. Brian swallowed hard. Laura looked down at the floor. Captain Pierce's hands twitched, as if searching for authority that had slipped away. And Marcus still standing in the same aisle, in the same pale gray suit under the same sunlight, was no longer just a passenger in first class. He was the gravity of the entire cabin. Every camera caught it. Every passenger felt it. The verdict had shifted. The balance of power had flipped. And for the first time since the confrontation began, it wasn't Marcus who was on trial. It was them. The silence after Marcus's words was deafening. The problem is how you treated someone you thought didn't matter. Every syllable hung in the cabin like a final sentence. Passengers sat stunned, their phones still raised, their faces caught between outrage and awe. Rachel's voice broke through the stillness, firm and clear from his pocket. "Sir, the board is watching. How would you like to proceed?" Marcus didn't look at his phone. His gaze never left the crew standing before him, Brian shifting uncomfortably, Laura clutching her useless radio, Captain Pierce fighting to hold on to authority he no longer possessed. Nicole, in seat 2 Ampere, tried to sink smaller into the leather that no longer felt like hers. Marcus's reply was soft but absolute. "Effective immediately, they are terminated." All of them. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Nicole's head snapped up. "You can't," she stammered, but the phone in his pocket chimed with confirmation. Rachel's voice again. "It's done. Their access is revoked, their contracts voided. Security will escort them off when we land." The shock was seismic. The crew's ID badges buzzed faintly, the screens flashing red. Brian fumbled with his, disbelief painted across his face. Laura tried to tap her radio again, but the line went dead. Captain Pierce's shoulders slumped as though the very title he'd carried for decades had been stripped away in an instant. Nicole sat frozen, lips parted, her glass of champagne shaking in her hand. This isn't real," she whispered. Emma stood, clapping first. The sound cracked through the cabin like thunder. Michael followed, holding his live stream high, narrating into the mic. He did it. He fired them on the spot. Justice served. Passengers erupted, applause breaking through the luxury hush that had once cloaked this cabin. Mia wiped a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Her voice carried across the cheers. "Thank you for standing your ground." Marcus turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the passengers. When the noise settled enough, he spoke once more, not to the crew, not to Nicole, but to everyone, to the witnesses, to the cameras, to whoever would watch this beyond the cabin walls. Dignity is not optional. It's not something you grant or deny based on appearance. Today, you watched people in uniform and privilege decide a man didn't belong until they learned who I was. That's the problem. That's why we fight it. Not with rage, but with truth, with power, with presence. The applause swelled again, louder this time. Passengers cheered, phones shook as they captured the moment, live streams filled with comments. Chills, respect. This is history. Marcus moved at last, stepping into the seat that had been his all along 2 Ampere. He unbuttoned his jacket, sat down with the calm authority of a man who had never been out of place, and buckled his seatbelt. Nicole scrambled from the seat beside him, gathering her things in frantic silence. No one offered to help her. No one defended her. She walked the aisle like a shadow. The crew stood motionless, their power stripped, waiting for the inevitable escort at landing. And Marcus Carter, calm, composed, anchored in dignity, rested back in his rightful place. The cabin, once a stage for humiliation, had become a theater of justice. Phones captured the final image. A black CEO, silent and steady, seated in first-class sunlight, while those who doubted him faded into irrelevance. He hadn't raised his voice once, and yet, his presence had spoken louder than all of them combined.